I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Shriram Ragavan. Mr. Shriram Ragavan, Vice President of IBM Research for Artificial Intelligence, leads a global team of research scientists and engineers dedicated to advancing AI and driving its application in the digital transformation of enterprises. An alumnus of Stanford University and the Indian Institute of Technology, Chennai, Mr. Sriram has earned multiple IBM Corporate and IBM Research Accomplishment Awards. We are delighted to welcome Mr. Shriram Ragavan to share his insights on the fast-changing AI revolution and its impact.
Good evening. Thank you to United Way Chennai for the opportunity to share a few perspectives on AI. I wanted to take this opportunity to first reflect a little bit on how surreal it is to be a technologist and particularly an AI researcher at this time. In the last 5 years, there's been 2 occasions in which we have seen what usually happens inside of research labs and product development labs literally happen in public in the front pages. The first time it happened was with COVID, when I think the signs of epidemiology happened in the front pages, where we were all witness to graphs of spreading of viruses, early results of vaccines. We saw it live. Typically things that you never hear until the results are solid, it's in a textbook or in a product. You saw that with epidemiology. Much the same is happening in AI. So in many ways, what you're seeing happening is amazing technology out of the labs, getting developed, demonstrated, driving economic value, or at least predicted economic value on a daily basis. And it doesn't happen often. Let me give you an example. I'm sure you all heard the word DeepSeek, thrown at you. Here is a model that was produced by a company, which in almost any other circumstance would have been an interesting result that shows up in an academic conference. Today, that model drove $500 billion of market movement. So that's really what happened. So it is really surreal to be a technologist. And I would also tell you, the thing that started this all, at least in the recently, was ChatGPT. What was it? It was an artifact produced by a research lab, which at that time did not even want to be or did not intend to be a product company. They happened to have the brainwave of wrapping it in a chat interface so that they could just give it to humanity. And in 2 months, they saw 100 million active users per month. And overnight, they decided, okay, now I have to figure out what to do with this. So the reason I say that is there is 2 ways you can look at this, right? You can look at this and say, this whole thing is a bubble. I don't care, that none of this is real, completely dismiss it. Or you can completely buy into this whole hog and decide that everything that you see in the front pages is true. As is always the case, the reality is somewhere in the middle. And so what I'd like to do in the next 15 minutes in my remarks, and certainly in the follow-on QA, is give you a perspective of what is the real technology shift, what has actually happened, why are we excited, at least as technologists, on what is happening, and then where we actually see value getting created, and we can certainly, of course, explore the India angle and its implications. But just some numbers to ground us. So to give you a perspective, $100 billion of venture capital is going into AI annually. That's increasing at 80% year on year. So about 1/3 of venture capital is going to AI. It's expected that by 2028, 20% of data center energy consumption will be for AI workloads. So think about that. The cloud is probably less than 2 decades old. So when you think about Amazon, Azure, everybody, Google building clouds, that's 2 decades old. And we are saying in 3 years or 5 years since the birth of AI, 20% of energy consumption of data centers is going to be AI. And today, about the prediction, I looked at a bunch of studies. You can pick your favorite version. About $4.5 trillion of corporate profit is expected by the end of the decade, motivated by AI. So now, where does all this come from and what actually happened? So bear with me. I don't intend to write code or put an equation here, but I do want to articulate what I think actually happened and what I know actually happened from a technologist perspective. So AI is not new. Let me do the math, 1956. So we are talking 68 years old. AI is 68 years old. It has gone through a lot of springs, winters, and summers. There was a point when if you were an AI researcher, you chose a wrong career choice. If you were a faculty in AI, you didn't get an ounce of funding. But something changed happened. So what happened? The previous generations of AI, all of the technologies we have seen in the past, machine learning and whatever word you hear, they were all task specific, which meant that if I had to come and solve a particular problem, I had to build an AI model for that problem. Forget whether the model is a large language model, you had to build a model for that problem, which means that I had to go into a company and said, I'm going to automate how I look at risky clauses in a procurement contract. Let's say that's a problem I wanted to solve. I would have to build a model for that, which means I'd have to get your SME time, collect data, train a model, deploy it. Next problem, I would have to do that all over again. So the challenge we had with all previous versions of AI was the ROI bar was very high. So unless I had a business model like a Google or an Amazon where I was freely getting data because I had an ad-supported model. We were all clicking on links. We were all buying things. I got data for free notionally. Or you had a use case like search or Google where every ounce of improvement is worth billions of dollars. You could just not scale AI. So there was a point where the technology existed to build models, but you could only do one task at a time. What actually happened in this world that we are talking about today is we started to get a real taste for generality, which is you are able to build these models which are more general purpose, that I can come in and adapt them quickly. So rather than taking, let's say, $100 to build an AI model, I have a pre-trained model. I can come in and it takes me $1 or $2 to build your use case. So if, as long as the ROI is more than that $1 or $2, that's good. I can now move on to the next use case. I can start to scale. So that is a real technology inflection point. And that is not hogwash. So that is real. And that is the actual underlying technology value prop. Now, why you're seeing all this obsession about models today is today the person who builds the model or the company that builds the model is coming to you and they hold all the cards. I have invested, I have the expertise, I'm doing everything, I'm the owner, now you're going to use my model to deliver value. But what I want to leave with you, and I will talk a little bit about use cases, is you're going to see value shift from not just the model player to really the users of the model. I think Neil Khan said it well when he talked about those three phases. That middle phase of innovation and diffusion, you're going to see that shift into innovation happening very, very soon. But the takeaway that I wanted to land is the whole thing is not a bubble. Valuations may be a bubble. There may be some that you could debate whether you can make sense of their numbers, but there is a real underlying technology shift. And that shift is the move from task-specific AI to general-purpose AI that you can adaptively use. So that's sort of the first message that I wanted to land. And part of this is also the reason why I wanted to land that message is there are a lot of myths floating around. So I also want to take this opportunity to do a little bit of myth busting. So bear with me. I'm going to make a lot of normative statements, so take them for what they are. But I do think the only way to bust a myth is to be explicit about the fact that it is a myth. So the first myth we were told, and we were told that myth, we as in the larger world was told, is it takes billions of dollars to build a useful model. And I actually think there were people who flew all the way from the US to India and actually told this country not to bother building a model because they said it's going to cost you billions of dollars to build a model. Absolute myth. What has happened if you look at the technology curve over just the last 3-4 years is the cost and the expertise and the data to build useful models. Again, I'm using the word useful model, not necessarily the largest and biggest model. If you want to play the macho game to say, I have the biggest model with the largest number of parameters, yes, you need lots of dollars. But if you think about useful model, that is dropping like a rock. So I'll give you a very concrete example. There may be a model that is not probably in the lingua franca today, but was released by Google with much fanfare. About 18, maybe 20 months ago, there was a model called PaLM. PaLM had 500 billion parameters. today available to all of you from every provider, whether it's a Google, it's a Microsoft, a Meta, or an IBM. There are models that are less than 10 billion parameters. That means the model is 1/100th the size. That will beat that 500 billion parameter model on every benchmark that is useful. So what does that mean? It means that the claim that for a model to be useful, you need massive volume and that you need massive amount of hundreds of billions of dollars or $1 billion of capital is untrue. You can build useful models today for tens of millions of dollars. Not chump change, but it's still tens of millions of dollars. Why is that happening? I think the reason it's happening is after a long time in AI, where there was a plethora of techniques and people were trying all sorts of things. We tried for 60 years to figure out how to build intelligence systems. We finally figured out how to build at least some kind of systems that generalize, but more importantly, there is one underlying architecture for what we are doing. As soon as that happens, smart people across the world are getting unleashed. So today, if you are a graduate or an expert in almost any field of computer science, math, or EE or whatever, if you are a master's or a PhD student, or you are trying to start a startup, what is the workload you are focused on optimizing? AI. So the amount of talent getting unleashed to optimize AI is so high that almost any number you hear today, this is what it's going to cost, is going to cost you 2x, 3x, 4x cheaper 6 months from now. So that trend is inexorable because the amount of human capital and innovation being thrown in at something like this is unprecedented. I mean, the DeepSeek was just an example. I'm sure we can talk about DeepSeek a little bit more, but that's sort of one trend to keep in mind. So the myth that I want to bust is you need billions of dollars to build useful models. There is a second myth, which is, I think I want to approach it this way. There's a myth that says, you hear the word AGI, artificial general intelligence, and you see now that showing up. I absolutely abhor that word because it's completely ill-defined. So depending on who you are, you can either choose to believe you are already at AGI, you can choose to believe you will never get AGI, you can choose to believe your AGI is 6 months away or a year away. The reality, I think the only thing you have to think about is, we are certainly sitting at the cusp of artificial useful intelligence. That's certainly happening. I really don't care whether that is AGI or not. That's a complete myth. And so when you think about AI startups, AI companies, AI processes, the two questions actually that are irrelevant are, how big a model do you have is not relevant, and whether you are at AGI or not is irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is, where are you going to create value? And I'll talk about where I see value creation happening. So value creation, when it comes to AI and value creation, I want to draw a distinction between consumer AI and enterprise AI. So what is the distinction I draw? Consumer AI is AI today, is actually what is in the airwaves, right? When you talk about OpenAI releasing a model, or DeepSeek releasing a model, or Meta releasing a model. That consumer AI, the winner in consumer AI is going to be determined by who has distribution. I find it very hard to believe that a pure play model player without distribution advantage. What do I mean by a distribution advantage? I either have an operating system, so I am Apple, I'm selling phones with my software on you. I am Google, I own Android. I am Meta, I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have Google, I have YouTube. So either I have distribution advantage or I have something that all of you are coming as consumers across the world. That is going to continue to dominate because all of those players are also building AI. So for a pure play model player to come and win in consumer AI, I think is very, very hard to do. So consumer AI is going to be, there may be a rare winner or two, but for the most part, consumer AI is going to go to whoever has distribution advantage. And you today know who are the players with distribution advantage. There may be others. I think enterprise AI has phenomenal untapped opportunities. But the value in enterprise AI is going to come when the shift comes from, and it's happening today, from simply a discussion on models to the use cases on how I'm going to use enterprise data. So as a concrete example, and this is a personal experience from IBM, but this is public knowledge, so I will happily share. Over the last 4 years, through AI and automation, we have about $2 billion worth of savings that we can tangibly attribute to the increased use of AI within our businesses. So that is in human resources, enterprise resource management, IT management, enterprise performance management, customer service, call centers, technical support. $2 billion of tangible savings that goes to the bottom line that we can directly attribute to the use of AI and inside our own enterprises. That, I think, is the most near-term tangible economic value that you're going to get as enterprises start adopting AI for productivity. But for that to happen, the conversation, which is what is happening, is shifting from which is the best model to what is a good enough model, because a good enough model is probably cheaper than the biggest model out there. And then the question starts to shift to what do I have to do, what use case do I target, and how do I start rolling it out. That is a big shift we are starting to see now. And I'm very enthused because I think the problems may be boring. The technology is fancy, but the problem may be boring. The problem that's boring is still, can I improve my customer service? Can I automate my call centers? Can I make my HR processes more efficient? Can I reduce the cost it takes to acquire talent? Can I reduce the cost of my procurement process? Can I run my quote to cash 10% cheaper? And those relatively boring and mundane processes, all of them are ripe for automation, and that is sort of where I see a ton of immediate value in AI getting created. Across the globe, if I had to put use cases, what are the 3 or 4 big categories of use cases where I see AI getting applied successfully by enterprises? First category is customer service across the board. The second category is automation of all of these business processes. Third area, a lot in human resources, especially in human resource heavy sectors. And then the last area is in IT management. IT operations, software engineering, software development, systems management. Those are the 4 big buckets where across industry and across the globe, we see real value created. And today the value first is to the bottom line. Initially the value is all in productivity. It will shift to revenue, but we're right now, it's much easier for enterprises to enter with a sense of productivity. So that was, if you will, 3 parts of things that I wanted to talk about. One is to declare quite normatively that there is a real technology shift. So while it may look like a bubble from a valuation perspective, do not throw the baby with the bathwater. Do pay attention to AI because it is here to stay. So that was the first one. Second is I wanted to, like I said, clarify this whole set of myths around larger is required, larger is better, you need huge capital. The third is where I see value getting created in enterprise AI. So in the last couple of minutes, I just want to conclude with what else is happening in the AI world that we can certainly pick up in Q&A. First is there is a very, very intimate connection between AI and semiconductor technology. Semiconductor industry is expected to touch $1 trillion by 2030. A significant amount of that is driven by what's happening in AI. So as you think about strategy at a national level, it is very hard to tease apart AI and semiconductor. They are related, and so you'll have to think strategically across the board. So that's one. The second is geopolitics. Today, just as you probably would not have invited a technologist to a session like this, today we find as technologists us going into conversations we never typically go into. That's because AI is at the heart of every national security, national growth. It's at every conversation, and geopolitics is driving a lot of decisions in AI. Geopolitics is also driving a lot of decisions in semiconductor, and I'm sure it is clear to everybody that there is a new, if you will, wall starting to emerge, if you will, between the Western world and the Eastern world. And that wall is today being drawn virtually through policies, investments in AI and semiconductor technology. So I do not believe that you can tease apart AI and geopolitics anymore. And for the very simple reason, every country believes that the next generation of wars is going to be fought digitally. So if AI is going to be at the core of superiority, it's quite natural that it is at the center of any conversation with geopolitics. And then the last comment I want to make, and this is something I always include in any speech that I give, and that's my personal passion as well, which I strongly believe that while I said the impact of AI in enterprises today is probably in the mundane, boring use cases, right? By no means not useful, but well understood use cases. Where technology is always used to drive efficiency, you're going to get efficiency from AI. What I am personally most excited about is the impact that AI is going to have on scientific discovery itself. So when you hear things like AI is going to transform material science, AI is going to transform drug discovery, AI is going to transform how we do fundamental science, I think that is probably, in the long term, the most impactful impact of AI on humanity. Right now, we are talking about business process automation and IT automation, but I truly believe that from a long-term perspective, the impact of AI on science is going to be probably bigger than anything we imagine. So let me conclude with the following statements. While there's a lot of noise in AI, there is real value. So if you are a business leader, a country leader, I do not think you have the luxury to ignore AI. And certainly you're all not, but I just wanted to emphasize that there is a real technology shift. I would encourage you to think of AI much like how you would think of the internet. So when the Netscape, and in fact the ChatGPT moment is very much a Netscape moment. The Netscape, the browser came up. It was a moment where it became clear to everybody that something fundamental is happening around connectivity. I'm sure you all remember a time when you used to ask a company, do you have a website? Are you online? Or you would ask a company, do you have a mobile app? Right? It was a choice to be online or not online. It was a choice to have a mobile app or not. I think today you don't ask that. You just assume that. Right? So you actually, the notion of internet is almost irrelevant now because it has become part of the fabric of society. You make the assumption. You should think of AI that way. So today, you probably go around asking, do you have an AI project in your company? Right? Do you have an AI center of expertise? Right? What are you doing in AI? My statement to you is the true test of a technology having long-lasting impact is when you stop talking about it. And I believe a decade from now, the same will be true for AI as it is true for the internet and the mobile. It will be part of our life, and you won't even know that it exists. So on that note, thank you for the time, and enjoy the rest of the day.